Image, pressure, excess, expectations, all of these factors can derail a career, even for the biggest stars. Today, we're going to look at the 10 superstars whose problems have the greatest impact on their careers and public perception. Let's get started. Lamine Yamal didn't have time to build an image. It was imposed on him before he had even finished growing. At 15, he made his debut with Barca. At 16, he was already a starter and a European champion. At 17, comparisons with Messi were no longer a debate. They became a slogan, repeated everywhere, all the time. His talent is obvious, but so is the pressure. His problem isn't technical. It's psychological and media-driven. Every match is analyzed as if it must either confirm or disprove a prophecy. If he scores, the world talks about a genius. If he disappears for 20 minutes, social media asks, is he overrated? The environment around him moves at an unreal speed. Social media controversies, post-match statements, disproportionate reactions to every provocation, and a level of media exposure that even established players take years to learn how to handle. The episode that made everything worse, just before a Clásico, he said on a live stream, "Real Madrid, they cheat, they complain." The media explosion was instant. On-pitch confrontations, furious Madrid players, former Barca figures publicly calling him out. The club even had to reduce his media exposure and monitor his social networks to limit the damage. At 18, he is already living in an environment where every word becomes a headline, every gesture a controversy. His relationships, his nights out, his Instagram posts, everything is scrutinized like those of an adult celebrity. Yamal's real problem is the speed at which his life is moving. He hasn't yet had time to define himself, and the world has already decided who he is supposed to be. His challenge is easy to put into words, but hard to live with, regaining control of his own story before it slips away from him. Kylian Mbappé is a unique case in modern football. Very early on, he was no longer just a player, he became an institution. At 19, he won the World Cup. At 23, PSG offered him a contract presented as the most powerful in the history of French football. A contract where, according to many sources, he had direct influence over the club's sporting strategy, choice of coach, recruitment policy, and a guaranteed central role in the organization. Whether that's all true or not, the key point lies elsewhere. His status went far beyond that of a simple striker. The problem is that this power creates a logic he becomes trapped in. He becomes the center of everything: the game, internal tensions, club communication, and even controversies. Every gesture is dissected. Every statement takes on political proportions, and every average performance is interpreted as a loss of influence, not just a poor match. When he moves to Real Madrid in 2024, the stakes change completely. At PSG, he stood alone at the top. In Madrid, he joins a dressing room full of established players. In a club where no one is above the badge, the challenge is no longer sporting, it's coexistence, learning to share space, leadership, and the spotlight. Mbappé's real issue isn't talent, attitude, or discipline, it's the management of the power surrounding him. How do you keep improving when you've become an economic, political, and sporting entity before even turning 25? The true test of his career is no longer only on the pitch. It lies in his ability to remain a player within a system that tried to turn him into an executive. Cristiano Ronaldo built his entire career around one simple idea: never disappear. Since adolescence, he has lived with the conviction that a day without improvement is a wasted day. At Manchester United, staff at Carrington used to say they sometimes had to turn off the lights just to make him stop training. That obsession took him to the top, but it also became his main trap. His problem today isn't physical, it's identity-based. Ronaldo doesn't know how to exist anywhere other than at the center of the project. Time passes, but his self-image doesn't age. In his mind, he is still the indispensable player, the striker everything must revolve around. That mindset sometimes pushes him to fight against a reality he refuses to accept. With the Portuguese national team, this blockage has been visible for several years. Portugal can't take him out of the starting 11 without triggering a crisis. Benching him is politically complicated. Keeping him as a starter imposes a style of play built around him. The result? The team moves forward with a break on. Young talents have to adapt to his presence, and Portugal struggles to evolve toward a truly modern structure. At club level, the same pattern repeated itself. At Juventus, then at Manchester United, then in Saudi Arabia, he expected the same place: the same status, the same respect he had during his Madrid years. Ego isn't the issue in itself. It's the need to be treated forever like a 28-year-old, an expectation that creates tension as soon as reality no longer keeps up. Ronaldo was never destroyed by pressure or criticism. He was shaped by them. But today, what complicates the end of his career is what he himself built, a legend so dominant that even his national team can no longer imagine a future without him. Vinicius Jr. plays with an intensity that very few players can control. For him, football isn't just a sport, it's raw emotion on display. Every dribble, every contact, every provocation becomes personal. From the moment he arrived at Real Madrid, defenders understood that a single word or gesture was enough to pull him out of his game, not because he is immature, but because he operates in a mindset where everything is felt at 100%. Vinicius's real problem isn't technical, it's emotional. He plays with such total commitment that he sometimes struggles to separate the game from the context around it. Opponents' provocations get to him, repeated fouls frustrate him, and everything can swing in a matter of seconds. In La Liga, this behavior has been amplified by an environment that never truly protected him. Racist abuse, chants in stadiums, and media controversies have added enormous weight to every match. He found himself against his will in the role of a symbol, a role he never asked for. This emotional burden makes him both brilliant and vulnerable. When he channels his anger, he becomes unplayable. When that anger overflows, he exhausts himself in battles that have nothing to do with football. He is a player who hasn't yet found the balance between the energy that makes him exceptional and the energy that can sabotage him. Vinicius's challenge, then, isn't to improve with the ball at his feet. It's to choose when to react and when to let things go. Tactical maturity will come, but emotional maturity will be decisive. It's what will determine whether his temperament becomes a long-term strength or a lasting weakness. Erling Haaland lives in a permanent paradox. His numbers are so extreme that everything he does is judged through an unrealistic lens. When a normal striker goes 3 matches without scoring, it's called a dry spell. When Haaland does it, people start asking if he's finished. His problem isn't on the pitch. It comes from the expectations created by his own level. Since arriving at Manchester City, he has been treated like a goal-scoring machine. That status has trapped him in the image of a player who must score constantly, regardless of the tactical context or the game plan. When he touches the ball less or is less involved in build-up play, it's immediately framed as a flaw, even though his role is, by nature, highly specialized. The obsession with his overall involvement often erases what he's actually there to do, finish chances. His extremely methodical approach to performance reinforces this perception as well. Between strict nutrition routines, controlled sleep, tailored training, and his obsession with optimizing every detail, Haaland sometimes looks more like a scientific project than a player freely expressing himself on the pitch. This preparation makes him devastatingly effective, but it can also create a form of isolation, almost a distance from the game itself. There is also the weight of the system. Guardiola gives him a perfect framework, but a rigid one. Haaland depends heavily on service inside the box. When City struggle to find space or slow the tempo, his influence naturally drops, which fuels the recurring debate about his contribution. It's an image issue more than a performance one. Haaland's challenge, then, isn't technical, it's contextual. He will have to learn to live with the standard he created himself, being exceptional all the time, in a sport where no one truly is. Neymar has spent his career fighting a contradiction. He is one of the most talented players of his generation, yet also one who has always seemed to look for ways to escape what that talent demands. His problem was never technical. It comes from his complicated relationship with pressure, fame, and the image the world projects onto him. From a very early age, he was labeled as the successor to Messi and Ronaldo. That constant comparison distorted his path. At Barcelona, he shone, but he also lived in the shadow of a genius who absorbed all the spotlight. The €222 million transfer to PSG was supposed to give him sporting independence. Instead, it threw him into even heavier exposure, where every injury, every absence, every off-field gesture became a media case. Neymar looked for escape routes, the parties, the trips, the streams, the absences that always seemed to come at the worst possible time. All of that isn't just carelessness. It's a way to breathe in an environment where everything he did was scrutinized to the extreme. He was often portrayed as a laid-back, unserious player, when in reality he was trying to exist without suffocating under Brazil's collective pressure and the individual expectations placed on a global superstar. The problem is that this need for freedom eventually clashed with sporting reality. Repeated injuries, inconsistency in the Champions League, and his inability to string full seasons together weakened his image. In Paris, when Messi and Mbappé arrived, he became less indispensable. That reinforced the feeling that he could no longer live up to the role everyone expected him to assume. The move to Al Hilal wasn't simply about money or comfort, it was a way out of a media game he no longer wanted to play. Neymar isn't running away from football, he's running away from the idea people have of him. His real problem is the gap between his true level and the life people expected him to live. A player capable of incredible moments, but one who never found an environment where he could simply be a footballer, without representing a country, a generation, an era, or a brand. Jude Bellingham lives the opposite problem of many young players. He was never treated like a young player. At 16, he was already carrying Birmingham. At 17, he was running the midfield at Dortmund. At 20, he became a central figure at Real Madrid with a maturity that made people forget his age far too early. That is precisely what creates his difficulty today. He never had the right to adapt, to make mistakes, or to learn progressively. Every match he plays becomes a psychological analysis. Every sign of frustration is interpreted as a symptom. Every underwhelming performance sparks debates about his role, his attitude, or his true level. He operates in an environment where good performances are expected and where even an average match is treated as the beginning of a decline. The speed at which he climbed the ladder created the impression that he could never take a step back, even just to breathe. Bellingham projects the image of a leader, but that image traps him. He constantly has to play with the posture of a mature, charismatic, and flawless figure. This creates internal pressure that shows in his body language and his reactions on the pitch. He never had the space to be a young player who is still learning, because he became an icon too quickly. Another issue is that his playing style demands intense emotional investment. He wants to carry the team, step up in decisive moments, and decide matches. That role suits him, but it also drains him. Playing every game as if it were a Ballon d'Or performance is unsustainable over a 10-month season. His long-term challenge will be learning not to carry everything on his shoulders. If he doesn't find that balance, he risks moving forward with a weight that even a player of his level cannot carry forever. Gareth Bale is one of the rare players whose main problem was never football itself. The real disconnect came from the relationship he had with the sport. At Tottenham, he played with a power and simplicity that made it feel like he could dominate any match. In Madrid, he continued to be decisive in big moments, but his emotional involvement was never at the level expected by a club that lives through the passion of its players. Bale's issue became clearer season after season. He delivered on the pitch when it mattered, but the rest of the time he seemed detached. The dressing room didn't see him as a leader, supporters didn't see him as a symbol, and the Spanish media turned that distance into a constant trial. Every injury became suspicious. Every absence turned into a rumor. Every neutral expression was framed as disrespect. In Madrid, there is no room for apparent indifference. Players are expected to show visible attachment, and Bale never did. His love for golf amplified that perception. For part of the Madrid fan base, it was proof that he preferred another world. Yet the issue wasn't distraction. It was the search for a space where he could be at peace, far from the permanent demands of Spanish football. When the famous Wales Golf Madrid flag appeared, he did nothing to avoid it. That moment confirmed what many already suspected. Bale never wanted to embody what Madrid expected from him beyond match days. Despite all this, he was decisive in multiple Champions League finals. But at a club like Real Madrid, being decisive is not enough. Bale's problem is that he never sought that identity. He wanted to play, decide big matches, and then go home. Madrid, on the other hand, wanted a permanent ambassador. That distance explains why the end of his career felt almost peaceful for him. When he retired, he showed no sign of regret. He wasn't tired of football, he was tired of what football demanded around it. His story reveals a simple truth. A player can be immense on the pitch and completely alien to what clubs expect from a modern superstar. David Beckham was always a player caught between two realities. On the pitch, he had a very clear profile. He excelled in precision, crossing, set pieces, and the ability to influence a match with a single technical action. Off the pitch, he was something else entirely. A showcase, a brand, a cultural phenomenon. And it was precisely this second identity that eventually became his main problem. At a certain point in his career, everything he did was interpreted through the lens of image. A new hairstyle became a national topic. An advertising campaign sparked debates about his priorities. A simple private photo reignited discussions about his sporting commitment. Beckham no longer controlled the narrative. The narrative controlled itself. He was no longer just an effective right midfielder. He was David Beckham, a global product, and that dynamic created a frustration that many overlooked. His problem took on another dimension after the 1998 World Cup. His red card against Argentina sent shockwaves through England. The entire country held him responsible for the elimination. Tabloids relentlessly targeted him for months, and that episode left a lasting mark. Beckham, who had built his image on public approval, suddenly had to deal with collective hatred that would have broken most players his age. That period shaped a more controlled, cautious version of him, almost trapped in constant discipline to avoid another media collapse. From that point on, every professional decision was seen as a strategic move. His transfer to Real Madrid, his move to Los Angeles, his growing media presence, everything gave the impression that he was trying as much to protect a brand as to extend a career. And that ambiguity often overshadowed what he truly was: an excellent player, disciplined, precise, and consistent. His biggest problem was never sporting. It was the weight of his own representation. Beckham lived under non-stop exposure, where the smallest mistake took on an exaggerated dimension. His image gave him an extraordinary career, but it also locked him into a role where he could no longer be vulnerable, spontaneous, or simply imperfect. And that pressure sometimes eclipsed his true qualities as a footballer. Marcus Rashford lives with a duality that very few footballers have ever had to face. On one side, he is an attacking player capable of carrying Manchester United, scoring goals, running in behind, and unlocking difficult matches. On the other, he has become a committed public figure, a social symbol, someone whose actions go far beyond football. And it's precisely this second dimension that has ended up influencing the first. When he launched his campaign against child poverty in the UK, the impact was massive. The government responded publicly, laws were adjusted, he became a national hero. But that recognition also created disproportionate expectations. Every public statement added another layer of responsibility, and those responsibilities don't disappear when he steps onto the pitch. They pile on top of everything else. Over time, his issue hasn't been a lack of sporting commitment, but an accumulation of emotional weight. A normal dip in form instantly turned into a debate about a supposed loss of motivation. A slightly closed-off attitude during a match was analyzed as if it revealed a lack of interest. Even his charitable work eventually became an argument against him, as if being too useful outside football explained every poor touch or missed shot. That shift created a unique kind of pressure, almost impossible to manage. His seasons reflect this constant tension. When he is focused purely on football, he can once again be one of the best attackers in the Premier League. But as soon as his form drops, everything tied to his public identity comes back into the spotlight. The criticism targets the man as much as the player. Rashford's real problem, then, isn't a lack of talent or effort, it's the gap between external perception and his internal reality. He has carried a rebuilding club at Manchester United, an exemplary public image in society, and overwhelming media exposure all at once. He tries to answer everything all the time, when no player should ever have to carry two careers at the same time. And his move to FC Barcelona is a way for him to focus solely on the pitch. We've just gone through 10 superstars and the problems that influence their careers just as much as their talent. Tell me in the comments which one you think is facing the toughest challenge. If you want a part 2 with other players, you can say that too. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, boost the video, and subscribe. See you soon.